so as to make sure that I would not spend so much time deviating from the topic assigned to me, I have to perhaps stick to my written statement. Uh, Good morning, fellow members of the Philippine Economic Society, colleagues in government, friends in the profession, uh, ladies and gentlemen. Pleasant morning to everyone. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers, the president of the society, Professor Stella Kimbo, for giving me this opportunity to discuss our priorities as we run the last mile. Here we are, 594 days to go. Knowing that our days are numbered, the all-important question is, what will be our priorities? I would say three tasks. One, to significantly reduce poverty, mainly through massive generation of quality employment. Two, to sustain the gains from governance reform. And three, to lay the groundwork for a more significant reduction of poverty. Allow me to elaborate on each of these three. First, to significantly reduce poverty. In the year 2000, the Philippines, together with more than 100 other nations, agreed on a set of development goals, the first of which is to end extreme poverty and hunger. Targets were set to indicate progress, and for poverty, the target is to halve the incidence of poverty in 2015 from its level in 1990. For many countries, especially in Asia, this first MDG target has been met less than 5 years after it was set. This was not the case in the Philippines, as will also be shown later by Roger, I believe. Using national poverty lines, poverty threshold account in 1991 stood at 34.4%. The MDG target is to bring this down to 17.2% in about 25 years. If only poverty decreased by at least 1 percentage point per year, then we would have more than achieved the MDG target. If poverty incidence is reduced by at least 2.1 percentage points every 3 years, then we would meet the MDG target. In 2006, we missed our target reduction in poverty by 3 percentage points. Poverty incidence should have been at 24% instead of 26.6. If we reset the starting point to 2006, results show that we still missed the target poverty reduction by 2.3 percentage point in 2009. Then resetting it to 2009, we still missed that target by 1.2 percentage point in 2012. The good news is, in the first semester of 2013, poverty headcount was recorded at 3 percentage points lower than the previous year. Although I realize that some of you have issues or questions about the comparability of the survey, but we can discuss that. We think that this was due to the sustained rapid growth during the period, averaging 5.9% from 2011 to 2013, even reaching 7.2% for fiscal year 2013. At the same time, the 4 Ps, or the CCT, increased its coverage and a number of government programs were implemented, with the 4P beneficiaries as the point of convergence. For the years 2015 and 2016, government programs will explicitly consider the special dimensions as discussed in the Philippine Development Plan midterm update, in addition to the cross-cutting measures of improving the business climate. The special dimension is meant to deliberately address the constraints being faced by the poor with respect to their access to opportunities afforded by economic growth. This lesson is discussed in detail in the 2012 to 2013 Philippine Human Development Report authored by Professor Emmanuel De Dios, Tubi Monsod, and a few others. That, from which we derive the policy implication that, quote, access has a spatial dimension in the degree to which people can benefit from the opportunities allowed by economic progress depends upon how the limits imposed by geography can be overcome. unquote. Thus, for the years 2015-2016 to 2016, government will implement differentiated interventions for the poor depending on their province of residence. Provinces were categorized into three. Category 1 provinces are the top 10 in terms of the magnitude of the poor, though the incidence of poverty may be low. In these provinces, development opportunities clearly exist, as in Cebu, Iloilo, and Pangasinan. However, pockets of poverty also exist in these provinces, meaning that certain segments of the population are unable to readily participate in the growth process. It may be the case that the skill set of the poor do not match the demand of the growing sectors in the province. Category 2 provinces are those with high incidence of poverty, even if the number of the poor is low. These provinces have fewer opportunities for development. They have small populations, are less dense, and are located in remote areas. Weather-related events and armed conflict could be additional constraining factors. The Category 3 provinces are those exposed and prone to multiple hazards, such as landslides and flooding. The list is based on the hazard mapping and assessment for effective community-based disaster risk management project. In these provinces, the marginally non-poor can slide into poverty relatively quickly owing to shocks or national disasters, as what we have seen in the last year when we had an unusually high incidence of disasters, particularly Typhoon Yolanda. In its category, we have a focus and specific strategy. For Category 1, the objective of the interventions will be to generate more employment opportunities. This can come by way of introducing new growth drivers like agro-industry, food manufacturing, and logistics, depending on the comparative advantage of the province. Current sources of growth will continue to be supported, recognizing that workers in the growing sectors constitute a market for other goods and services. The poor households can be organized and trained to provide for this market. In addition, improving human capital through investment in education and training, for example, the Tibet, will continue to increase the employability of the workforce. Introducing flexibilities in work arrangements may also be warranted. The strategy for Category 2 is to ensure access to basic social services, for example, health services, basic education, water, and sanitation, and to facilitate economic and physical mobility through investment in human capital and connectivity and connective infrastructure, while economic opportunities are being created in the area. Linkages between small producers and the supply chain of product or service providers in the more developed areas of the region will be facilitated. In areas where human security is particularly at risk because of violence or armed conflict, peace-building efforts will be earnestly pursued. While for Category 3, the strategies will focus on disaster risk reduction and mitigation, social insurance and social protection, and income diversification. We recognize that the generation of quality employment opportunities is the more robust strategy to reduce poverty, and this will come about with increases in investments. We want to increasingly shift employment from low to high productivity areas or sectors of the economy. As you all know, or perhaps know, in the recent development experiences of East Asia, this structural transformation of employment is key to massive poverty reduction. The PDP midterm update discusses in great detail the cross-cutting measures to improve the business climate. We are prioritizing certain sectors, either because of its potential to drive growth in the region and or its capacity to absorb labor. These are manufacturing, agribusiness, infrastructure logistics, tourism, construction, and business process management and information technology. For these sectors, roadmaps have been prepared, clearly identifying what needs to be done to encourage expansion. Let me turn to the second task, to sustain the gains from governance reform. The Aquino administration has implemented a number of governance reforms concerning revenue generation, for example, by the Bureau of Customs and the Bureau of Internal Revenue, debt management by the Bureau of Treasury, corporate responsibility among GOCCs by the GCG, expenditure management by the DBM, business registration by DTI, to name a few. In addition, we have sound macroeconomic fundamentals to show for it. Credit, of course, goes to not only the economic team, but to the Bangko Sentral as well. Quite explicitly, the Philippines has started to enjoy an unprecedented level of confidence among the international business community. The investment grade status accorded by the three major credit rating agencies in 2013 to 2014, and the improved rankings obtained by the country in several global competitiveness reports reinforce this positive assessment of the country's overall progress. The task at hand is to ensure that the governance reforms are carried forward. Concerning the management of public resources, a number of us in the executive are cooperating with Congress in drafting a bill that will ensure fiscally responsible, transparent, accountable, efficient, and effective public financial management. Moreover, we're striving to make the delivery of government service more efficient. Toward this end, we'll be rolling out a protocol for the conduct of regulatory impact assessment and critical regulations, knowing fully well that these regulations impose a cost on doing business while the benefits are not well determined. We are also in the final stages of rolling out the national M&E framework to be led by NEDA and DBM. Ultimately, the objective is to improve the effectiveness of government programs to achieve the targets set out in the PDP by assiduously monitoring them and subjecting them to periodic evaluation. Finally, the third task, to lay the groundwork for even more significant reduction of poverty. Note that this last task is related to the first two. In fact, if we succeed in the first two, reduce poverty and sustain the governance reforms, then the likelihood that we will succeed in this last task is quite high. But what is the groundwork needed so that beyond 2016, there will be an even more significant reduction in poverty? For this, I would like to go back to my previous research on poverty and adopt a three-pronged but forward-looking approach. First, we need to bring the economy to a higher growth path. Second, we need to ensure that the poor can participate in the growth process. And third, we need to build resilience among individuals and communities. Let me go to the first point. In 1991 to 2001, the economy grew by an average of 2.9%, which increased to 4.8% during the 2001 to 2010 period. Presently, under the Aquino administration, we witness an even higher average growth rate of 6.3%. I was looking at the numbers before I came here, and when was the last time we had a 4-year average growth rate of higher than 6.3%? That was in the 70s. So this is the first time in the last 3 decades that we have achieved an average growth rate of about 6% in 4 years. Looking at the sources of growth in recent years, we have reason to say that we are heading towards a higher growth path with good business climate resulting from transparent, accountable, and efficient governance. We can sustain a higher growth path by investing in technology and innovation, expanding logistical capacity, and ensuring a level playing field. One of the reasons for the weak investor sentiment in the country is the persistence of bottlenecks in the infrastructure sector. The country's infrastructure facilities and systems continue to lag behind those of our counterparts in the Southeast Asian region. According to the World Economic Forum's latest Global Competitiveness Report, 2014 to 2015, the Philippines ranked 91 out of 144 countries in terms of overall quality of infrastructure, way behind Malaysia's 25, Thailand's 48, and Indonesia's 56. Under the Aquino administration, spending for infrastructure has been increased from 2.1% of GDP in 2012 to 2.5% in 2013, with the aim of raising it further to around 5% of GDP by 2016. The NEDA board has already approved 1.06 trillion pesos, equivalent to $23.6 billion worth of projects, including 23 PPP projects worth about 516 billion pesos or $11.5 billion. Eight of these PPP projects have already been awarded. We have also identified problems in implementing infrastructure projects that could be addressed by legislation. Thus, the proposed amendments to the Build, Operate, Transfer Law and amendments to Republic Act 8974 an act to facilitate the acquisition of right-of-way, site or location for national government infrastructure projects and for other purposes. Government is also producing physical framework plans covering major areas in the country. This will make the public infrastructure program more predictable, and the private sector can then plan accordingly. To date, we already have the transport roadmap for Metro Manila and its surrounding environs with the support of the Japan International Cooperation Agency. With the support of World Bank, the roadmap for the rest of the country is expected to be completed soon. Roger still owes me that. For this purpose, we are also advocating the passage of the National Land Use Act, which aims to institutionalize land use planning as a means for rational and just allocation, utilization, management, and development of our country's land resources, and to provide policies and mechanisms for determining and evaluating appropriate land use. In order to further increase investments, we need to reduce, if not eliminate, barriers to entry. We have proposed amendments of the law on cabotage in order to address some of our inefficiencies in shipping logistics. We're also supporting various bills filed in Congress that are meant to reduce restriction for foreign investment. There is also the proposed competition policy that seeks to level the playing field to encourage new entrants. Enabling the poor to participate in the growth process. Beginning the school year, the Aquino administration has expanded the scope and coverage of the CCT program. The scope has increased to 4.09 million families, while the coverage expanded to include family members of high school age. This also implies that children, beneficiaries, who will be finishing elementary will continue to receive regular cash assistance from government. Note that this move was in response to a PIDS study, particularly notably Dr. Reyes, who is here, which suggests that deepening assistance to current beneficiaries rather than expanding coverage can take into account the K-12 program and increase beneficiary children's future wages by 40% than if they were to only reach elementary. That estimate come from Dr. Reyes, and that has been used repeatedly by the President and in Congress. So if there is anything wrong with that estimate, I can go back to Dr. Reyes. A massive reform in our education system is the K-12. As many of you know, this has been proposed long ago, but since it entails public and private costs, it has not been acted upon until now. But this is a necessary move to prepare our children for the new environment, more globalized, more integrated. Concerning the ASEAN Economic Community, for instance, when we discuss about qualification standards, the issue that always comes up is that our graduates lack at least 2 years of formal education when compared to their ASEAN counterparts. The K-12 addresses this issue and at the same time provides more opportunities for students to learn skills and acquire knowledge. Another major effort by the Aquino administration to equalize development opportunities is to pursue lasting peace with the Bangsamoro. As you know, the Bangsamoro lags behind in all indicators of incomes and outcomes. And this feeds into discontent, unrest, and ultimately conflict. However, we also realize that this deprivation cannot be adequately addressed unless there is peace in the area. In 2012, the framework agreement on the Bangsamoro was signed between the leadership of the MILF and the government. This paved the way for more dialogues on how to bring about lasting peace. Right now, the Bangsamoro Basic Law is already in Congress for deliberation. A Bangsamoro development plan has also been drawn up. The plan includes a transition phase that began this year. The intent is to install the Bangsamoro political entity by 2016. If we succeed, and we know that we still need to bring in other groups, then we will have achieved a major breakthrough in our pursuit of inclusive development. Finally, to build resilience among individuals and communities. Our country is visited by at least 20 typhoons a year. Last year, the strongest typhoon to ever make landfall in recorded history hit the Philippines, just as when we were delivering 6 to 7% growth in our GDP. Looking back and considering the experiences of other countries like Japan with the tsunami, US with the Hurricane Katrina, and others, we know that there is nothing we can do to prevent these natural calamities. We can only mitigate the impact, and we are doing this by investing in disaster preparedness, promoting income diversification, and coming up with an enhanced protocol for disaster reconstruction that is outcome-oriented and conforms to the Build Back Better principle. The Aquino administration has invested heavily in technology and equipment that will enable our meteorologists to warn us about impending typhoons way ahead of time. We have also come up with an early warning system that will be perfected in time and then widely disseminated. Most LGUs already have a disaster protocol in place corresponding to the warning. Over the next 2 years, we will be investing in disaster-resilient evacuation structures, not schools, that will be used for the purpose. This is income diversification and social protection will be priority programs in the next 2 years. Social linkages will be encouraged as well. And this is still a tall order. No slack time in the next 2 years, but it can be done. Over the next 2 years, we target GDP growth to average about 7 to 8%. For this year, we think that the low end of our target could still be met. The high end is quite already very challenging. In the industry sector is projected to grow the fastest, while the services is expected to remain robust during the period. We likewise target substantial improvement in the labor and employment situation in the country. Our goal is to reduce the unemployment rate from 7% in 2012 to 6.6% in 2016. We are also committed to improving the quality of employment, and this will be reflected as a reduction in the underemployment rate from the current 20% to about 17% in 2016. We also expect the share of wage and salary workers in total employment, which is a broad measure of employment quality, to continue its upward trend. Income poverty is targeted to be reduced to 19% by 2016. With the strategy that we have developed and shared with you, we thought that that is doable. The intention is really to increase the elasticity of poverty with respect to growth, and I think Roger will be demonstrating, showing to you later whether that is those numbers are within the realistic range. Indeed, good governance plus good economics, it's what brings about inclusive growth and sustainable development. And speaking about legacy, before my term is over at NEDA, we intend to come up with a long-term vision or plan that will help inform the formulation of the next medium-term plan for the country. This report will draw up scenarios of growth and developments spanning the next 40 years. It will take into account population dynamics and external developments. For instance, did you know that in the next 5 years, we could be among the upper middle income countries? And in the next 15 to 20 years, we could escape the so-called middle income trap. What will it take? In brief, we need to retain or surpass our relative standing globally in terms of per capita income growth and improvements in competitiveness. This requires consideration of second derivatives. And encourage each one of you, colleagues in the profession, to participate in that exercise. I am still hoping that my dear colleague Noel de Jos will take the lead in the crafting of this exercise. We plan to map out the scenarios in the long-term development report. Needless to say, we welcome all offers of help, especially from our esteemed colleagues, as I said, from the PES and our development partners. And on that note, I end this address. Thank you for your consideration.